Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So, in today's message, we're going to be talking about a word study and hopefully how it can bring us some comfort, some inspiration with regards to how our life can feel confusing. It can feel kind of where we get to a place where we're sort of stuck, we're in transition, and we're trying to figure out again, like what our priorities are and who we are, even. It's kind of like at your core, you know who you are, and the majority of that never changes. But what I mean when I say transition and changing, everything about how you've lived your life, you can find yourself in transition where that's all changed, right? Like we know, especially after you come out of a toxic situation, a situation that you woke up to the fact that it was founded on deception. Maybe all of it was just one way, to you, but what you knew to be true was actually all a lie, and this is often described as a fantasy, right? Sam Vaknin talks a lot about this on his channel, and how I think specifically psychopaths will use or create this fantasy, which I feel like is just this web of deception to catch you in, to entrap you, and you're just sort of thinking you're caught up in this and you're living your life, but in all these ways within this web of deception, because this is what you know to be true, this is what you truly believe to be true. And meanwhile, the person or the people who are in this with you, you think they're in it with you, but they're really outside of it. They're really the ones who wove it, and they're just kind of dipping in here and there and pretending like they're a part of it with you, just enough. A lot of times this is called breadcrumbing, right? These people who are fooling you and conning you, a lot of times they'll just give you literally breadcrumbs of affection. and then they're just, I said dipping in, just for those breadcrumbs, just to kind of string you along and keep you willingly engaged in this web of deception. Meanwhile, they're off living this double life. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of thoughts, as usual, just flooding in my mind about what I want to share with you all, and so it's really hard to be in the middle, like mid-sentence with you all, sharing my thoughts, and I've got all these new ones coming in. So if you see me hesitate, that's what's going on in here. So, but anyway, I hope you're doing good. I hope that as you are continuing to learn about wolves in sheep's clothing and how they operate, I hope that you are able to keep some distance, some emotional and intellectual distance, so that you are staying objective about it and not hooked in emotionally. I think that it's natural in the early stages of learning and growing and healing, after you've exited a web of deception, rather, after you've come out of that, you're still sort of hooked in emotionally to the whole thing. So as you're learning, it's going to be churning those emotions. I think that's totally normal. But as you get some distance, I just hope that you're able to just create literally the distance in here too. So again, like that you're able to learn and hear about these topics objectively, and not be so affected. And so we're going to be talking today specifically about this transition phase. And when I said earlier, it might kind of feel like a stage of confusion. Here's what I mean. It's kind of like you may have reached a place of healing where you're like, okay, now what? It's like I kind of get the gist of how con artists work, and what to look out for as I'm meeting new people to get to know better and things like that. But besides my new foundation of understanding, there's also this aspect of my life that I have to work with, where you've probably moved, You've probably lost a lot of social connections through different relationship fallouts or divorces or leaving a job or whatever it was. I'm sure you've probably lost other connections besides this one main person that maybe you were engaged with, and now you're no longer engaged with them in some way. So there's a much wider scope of just a total landscape of changes in your life. So many different things. And so I just hope to encourage you that I understand that this stage is kind of difficult to navigate. Your emotions may have stabilized. Like I said, you may have come to a place where you're content with what you've learned. You kind of want to always keep learning to some degree, but maybe it's not your central focus anymore. You're not just obsessed with trying to learn as much as you can about it, because you're kind of like, okay, I really get the gist of it, and you're ready to kind of move on with life, right? But it's kind of like, how do you do that? So we're going to be talking about this weird kind of in between stage. So I want to open by making a statement that says, essentially, there's a difference between you, your essence, right? Who you truly are, and your life. And I think sometimes it's important to bring that to our conscious awareness, because I think subconsciously we can kind of enmesh the two, and become identified with our life. And that's where I think we can kind of get taken for a ride with our emotions and all the ups and downs and everything. So I think just it helps to bring some objectivity into the equation when you look at it this way, that there truly is a difference between your life and your actual essence of who you are, okay? So let me highlight that. In the Bible, there's a verse in Luke chapter 9, verse 25 that says, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self?" So this is going to be a very big foundational point in the message today, okay? And let me just kind of highlight that with this example. So years and years ago, and I think I've shared this with you all before, but I saw this Dateline episode. And, I haven't watched Dateline in years, probably because of life, but there was this awful episode where which they're all awful. If you've ever seen Dateline, you know what I'm talking about. They're mysteries, which I enjoy, trying to figure out mysteries and like a whodunit kind of thing. But when it's real life stories, and it's just pretty bad that they really kind of never run out of new shows, unfortunately, because evil will always be around, right? But there was this one show that just really kind of hit me different, ironically. And this particular episode, this lady had met this, I think she was just middle-aged, right? Didn't have any children that I know of, that I remember. And she met this man, and he seemed kind of too good to be true. He was really good to her, and which in the world of narcissism, one of the hot topics is where there's a term called love bombing, right? Well, here's the thing. I think sometimes we can think of love bombing as like an initial kind of honeymoon phase for a relationship, and then it kind of wanes. I think it's waxes. I'm thinking about the moon phases. But it kind of dissipates, right? This honeymoon phase, this love bomb stage kind of dissipates. Well, I feel like in cases that are more psychopathic, where they are weaving this web of deception and trying to keep you entangled in it, so you're like in this fantasy land, but you think it's reality, and they're deceiving you for some ulterior malignant purpose, in that kind of a scenario, which is what was going on in this episode, the love bomb really never stops. It's like continual, just kind of buttering you up and just keeping you pacified, but it's kind of elaborate at times, and it's ongoing. And so from what I remember in this episode, that's what this poor lady went through. So this guy she met, he was like that. He was just like a over the top kind of dude with what he did with her. I mean, he would even like what's it called, like draw her baths, you know, her bubble baths and all this stuff. And so she was sharing her experiences with her friends, and they kind of got a bad feeling about him. And of course, she's like, what are you talking about? He's great. He's incredible, you know. Well, all along, he was slowly poisoning this lady because she had money. She had money. If I recall correctly, this was many years ago. But, yeah, it was really sad. And so, but it highlights this point, okay? It just goes back to that verse which came to me today. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world? Because it's kind of like that's what these people like that will try to do. Like, make you feel like they can give you the world. One of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful World with, I think it's Jimmy Stewart. I haven't seen it in a few years. I used to watch it every year at Christmas multiple times, but it's been a few years. But I loved it, where he was, you know, a young man, and he was trying to win the heart of his love, and Mary, and he was saying, you know, what do you want? Do you want me to rope the moon and bring it down for you? You know, I'll do it. And so it's kind of like, I hate to use that as an example because I really love this movie, but that's kind of how these people are. They make you feel like they love you to that extent, but it's very superficial. And so that's the part where I feel like if you are in a vulnerable position, or maybe you're just really naive or very inexperienced, and it doesn't have to just be romantic relationships. It can be a friendship, somebody who just pretends to be very supportive. I think there was a fairly recent horrible situation with a woman who was really just a very good soul, and she was very driven and just accomplishing a lot in life and doing well for herself. And this other woman came along and just befriended her and wanted to help, acted like she wanted to be her biggest supporter, and she allowed this woman to come into her life and to help her with her business and everything, and she wound up murdering this woman. So it's not just romantic, it can be friendships, it can be anybody at all. And so this is not going to be the focus of the message. I know I've rambled on and on about it forever, but it just kind of, you know, introduces us into the whole topic. But so it's important for that reason. But, you know, if you've ever experienced a situation like this, where not just you, but literally everybody else, typically, unlike the ladies' friends in the Dateline show, but typically, if this person is very showy with what they're doing for you, you know, like ticking boxes or whatever, then other people are going to believe, you know, this web of deception too. They're going to think they're great, you know, because again, they are a wolf in sheep's clothing, and their sheep's clothing is just so convincing. But this is where you have this internal struggle, because you have your intuition, your gut feeling that's like, something's off, but I can't put my finger on it. It's really, really, really great on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, I know in my bones, like, this is very different than any other friendship or relationship I've ever had, but it's new, see? You're inexperienced in this area. And so it feels kind of just empty, and there's just different tiny aspects, subtle aspects, but it's really those little things that are the biggest, right? Which is why a lot of times you end up just feeling very, very lonely, really more lonely in these kind of relationships or friendships than when you're alone. And so, but you have to really, really find your true personal inner strength when you are in the midst of these kind of relationships, because a lot of people, if you start to open up to people who are very fooled by this show from this person, and you're like, hey, I think something's wrong, a lot of times they can throw it back at you and make you feel like you're paranoid and you're delusional and all this stuff. And you're already questioning things yourself, so this is what can keep you stuck for a very, very long time. You know, again, like I've described it in the past, like these like dual realities running simultaneously, but everybody else can only see this one. But if you live with this person, or you work with them, or you're really close with them, you're experiencing both of them. And so it's very, very confusing for you. And so it's kind of like the solo journey. And you truly have to call, like I said, on your deepest strength within to pull yourself out of it, right? I think that a lot of us find in the end that the truth always does come out. And that will be your confirmation. A lot of times we have to act on intuition. We get to a place where we're just so zapped or so depressed or so sick or whatever it is that we have no choice but to exit a certain friendship, marriage, whatever it is, right? Job. We have to exit before we really have proof of anything. But I think, again, that a lot of us get that confirmation later. So, you know, I was journaling earlier about, you know, comparing my life in the past versus now. And one of the things I was thinking about was, you know, what did I used to, right? What did I spend most of my mental energy on? And my answer was just immediate. It was just responsibilities. In the past, it's just, I was just totally focused on, I need to do this and this and this and this and this. And yeah, I'd make time for things I enjoy, but in general, it was just, I felt like my life was very structured and I had these certain things I needed to do and things I wanted to accomplish. And so I kind of summed that up by writing responsibilities, right? And I still do that. I still care about my responsibilities and fulfill them or whatnot, but they're not really my focus. My mental energy is not just totally, you know, honed in there, you know what I mean? So now I would say my focus, where the majority of my mental energy goes, is on things of the heart, really and truly. And so you know, you can wake up and I wonder if this resonates with you at this stage in your life, but you can wake up and find yourself literally experiencing in real time Bible verses. And it's kind of like, look, I'm no expert. I'm not a scholar or anything like that in any area. You know what I mean? And so, but if you just have like certain things that you can recall from different belief systems, it's really interesting, because if they're tucked away somewhere in your mind from, you know, just memory, just reading stuff in the past or whatever, and then you know, you're going through life and you just have these moments of clarity where you recall these certain things like Bible verses, and it's like, oh my gosh. And for me, it has taught me that they're not only educational or instructional or like directives, but they are also prophetic. It's kind of like, and you don't realize that until you experience it firsthand, right? And so one of those is this. It goes right along with what I was just sharing with you all about responsibilities and how what I focus my mental energy on has shifted, you know, from responsibilities to things of the heart nowadays. So this verse is the one that says to take no thought for tomorrow. It's something like that. For tomorrow will take care of itself. You know what I mean? And so one of the messages I want to share with you all from that is this. Some things, and I would say even probably most things, don't require such a strong grasp. This has been one of my biggest lessons in life. So if you ever heard of, I think they call it type A personalities. It's kind of like the people who are not just a doer, but they're kind of like an anxious doer kind of like that person who truly is focused on responsibilities, but they're very anxious about it, and they kind of have this energy about them that makes you anxious too if you're in their presence. I don't think I've ever really been that way, but I can say that as far as like looking at it on a spectrum, I'm certainly not that way now. I'm actually on the far end of the spectrum, because I have loosened my grasp or my grip on pretty much everything to a great degree. And so, and what's interesting is, in so doing, it's not really even a conscious thing. It's just sort of a result of what I've been through and how I've grown, and just this transition that my life has gone through. Not only is this something that has happened within me, but it also has kind of made me sort of incompatible with other people who are very, very much entrenched in that kind of energy themselves, because it's not a peaceful energy. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that I don't have moments of heightened energy or anxiousness, because I do, but it's not my standard baseline mode every day, all the time. You know what I mean? I think that we all kind of get to a place where we become more conscious of the energies around us, you know? So the question you might want to consider or journal on would be this: where in your life can you loosen the grip? Where can you loosen the grip? And also, conversely, I think that's the right word here, where can you tighten it? So I just had to have the power company come out and trim up some tree branches, and it about killed me because I love my trees. I love them, and my yard is mostly natural. It's not landscaped per se, and no judgment if that's your thing. That's great. I actually used to live in a house like that, a couple of different houses in the past like that, and that's fine. But I just, at this point in my life, the more closely aligned with nature, the more I like it. So if there's like moss covering the ground and mushrooms and tree stumps and things like that, I'm all about that. So, and the trees, I love the trees, and so it just about killed me, because not only did they cut the branches that they really needed to cut, but they cut, all the way up. And so that was just a little side note, just about killed me. But, yeah. So the trees at this point are very lopsided, right? They look very out of balance, which goes into our next part of the message. So after a trying time in life, we often find ourselves, right, mostly out of balance. And so, let me just say this. I think that this is a totally normal and natural phase or state to be in after you've gone through some hard stuff, and so I think that it's wise during this time, when you're in transition, which is really what the majority of this message is about the transitional stage. Okay, when you're coming out of a web of deception and finding truth again, and finding truth as far as what your life is supposed to look like for you again, this in-between part, you're going to feel somewhat out of balance. And so this is not the right time, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert, but it's not the right time to adopt a label of any kind, or even like a permanent diagnosis, because transitions are just that. They're meant to be temporary. They're meant to take you from one place to another. So I just encourage you not to latch on to anything and with a firm grasp during this time. Just sort of let it flow. There's that old saying or proverb, whatever it is. It's like, it says, "Be like water." This is the perfect time to embrace that that philosophy, is during a transitional time in your life, right? So what is this transitional stage good for? I would say a lens you can try on is to consider it a time for exploration, right? A time for recalibrating, for getting curious about things. And because of that, who you surround yourself with during this time especially is going to be critical. Because if you surround yourself with people who are the kind of people that try to offer unsolicited advice, where they're kind of like, well, you ought to do this, or you should do this, or you should do that, just please be very careful, because this is somewhat of a vulnerable stage. And all the myths and gosh, it got dark outside all of a sudden. But in all the fairy tales and folklore, which we're going to be talking about the stories in a minute, during this transitional stage, that's when typically the main character, the hero in the journey, which I feel like represents just our journey in life in general, but they typically meet helpers, and that's fine, and it can be very, very good for us, but just your discernment is going to be just crucial during this time. So I just want to point that out. But yeah, you can take heart in the fact that it truly is a time to try things out and to explore and just consider life, all of life's possibilities. Just look at life through the perspective of adventure. It really helps to kind of kick you out of the blues, any kind of depressive state that you might find yourself in if you're ruminating. Just kind of just get out there and just try something different. And a lot of times it can feel really hard at first, but I feel like it's going to be better than not trying anything. You know what I mean? But so essentially, one lens I like to use during this transitional phase is to say, not only is it a time for possibilities and exploration, but it's also a time to recognize that you've been given a great gift, which is another shot at life. And so I think it's important because of that to pause long enough to think about what are the obstacles to catch and to rebuke, right? To cast away when they pop up. Obstacles to this mindset of it being another shot at life, right? One is if you have the thought pop up that says, I'm too old, if you're just really thinking about your age, and you're thinking about, major milestones in life, and maybe you've already accomplished this or accomplished that, and you're kind of like, what's the point now? I just encourage you to rebuke that kind of thought. And that could very much be tied into, even people that you surround yourself with too. Because you might unintentionally start to compare your life to others. And I've never been the kind of person to consciously compare myself or my life to others, but I think that to some degree, maybe it's human nature, and I think that it can affect us on another level, like where we're not even conscious of it. So not only unsolicited advice and just surrounding yourself with anxious energies or very rigid, you should do this or that kind of energies. All that kind of stuff keeps you boxed in, and you don't want to be boxed in. So just and so that kind of thought too, related to your age, I just encourage you to just kind of just put that off, put that to the side. Right along with that would be the thought of, well, I've already done this, that, and the other. Different milestones in life. Maybe you've already accomplished your career goals. Maybe you've already raised your kids, had kids and raised them. And so a lot of the major milestones, either they fell apart, and you're just not interested anymore, or they were never really on your radar, even though they're on a lot of other people's radars, or whatever it is, if it's if you can't look forward, because see, when you're young, I think it's kind of easy to dream. It's easier, not always easy, but it's easier when you're younger to kind of default to those very common, via, I guess, mainstream society. When I say common, that's what I mean, like milestones. And so it just kind of helps you, when you're young, to stay in a state of like faith and hope and dreaming and looking toward the future and all that, But if you have spent, especially if you've spent many years in a web of deception, it can feel like you just were just spinning your wheels. But I don't think that you were. I think that it still got you somewhere. And that's important to recognize. That's a really subtle but important shift to make in your mind, that you weren't actually spinning your wheels. And I think that figuring that out and truly believing that is, kind of part of this transitional stage, that we find ourselves in, okay? But just kind of keep an eye out, spiritually, intellectually, in your heart, your mind and your heart. Try to take those thoughts captive, as the Bible says. Try to catch those thoughts that really are serving as obstacles to your belief that there are good things ahead, and that there are possibilities even that you may not have ever conceived of. You know what I mean? All right. One thing, and this is one that really kind of, when I was journaling, it really kind of hit home. One thought that can be an obstacle, and that is this. Well, there's really nothing that the world has to offer me now, right, that will ever satisfy me again. And that's a hard one. And I think that it's understandable to get to that place. I don't think it's just indicative of depression. It is a very depressing thought. But I don't think it's just indicative of that alone. I think that a person who's truly doing the work and doing a deep dive in their mind and heart may get to that place where they're just kind of done. Because, going and doing these superficial, fun things in the past, and maybe being into materialism and whatever, that are really kind of traps that we all fall into when we're younger, or most of us, right, to some degree. There's a spectrum for everything. But, you get to a place of maturity where that kind of stuff just doesn't do it for you anymore. You know what I mean? And you got robbed or cheated out of having, your efforts, your soulful efforts, being a part of building something beautiful and deeper, because it was all lies. So you feel like you got cheated out of that. So you can find yourself coming to a place of where you're saying, really, there's just nothing. There's nothing here for me anymore. So I want to talk about that for a minute. Okay? So, and like I was saying, the old you may have been sort of been able to find all kind of stuff that was for you, that you were excited about. And it's not so much that you were, because I feel like I've never really been a very materialistic person or worldly person, but I think that you can just kind of be innocent in a way, that the worldly things to some degree were satisfying to you in an innocent kind of way. You know what I mean? But in this new stage of your life, they're just not. You have zero interest in the worldly things, So let's talk about that. What does it mean? What does it mean when these things don't interest you anymore? I would say it means that you have set your sight on things that live in, that reside in, that stay in, or are from a totally different space or realm. They exist, but they're not worldly, superficial, materialistic things. Okay? And like I said, because of this, the world can seem to offer very little to us now, right? So, in the myths and the fairy tales, okay, I would equate this to the stage of the journey where you're in the dark woods. This is the transitional stage. This is where you're on foot, typically. You're trudging through just some difficult terrain. It's usually dark. Sometimes it's kind of scary. It's sometimes very physically challenging in these stories. And you're climbing mountains. You're having to figure out how to get across the river. You're lost in the woods. It's all these random scenarios, but you're moving. You're moving, but you're kind of unsure. There's a great sense of uncertainty in these stories, which makes them very relatable, right? So, all these metaphors that we find in these stories that are in the environment, they can evoke a sense of fear, like I mentioned, but also I would say more so anxiousness. And so here we find anxiety a little bit, and it's related to uncertainty, which is really the big part of it. But it's not the anxiousness of knowing what to do, like a type A personality who's anxious about getting things done because they know how to get things done, and they just have to get them done. They have to get them done right, and it has to be done just right and fast and all this stuff. No, it's kind of like in these stories you're sort of forced, or the main character is sort of forced. They're stripped usually of their usual capacity and tools and everything they need to get things done. So a lot of times they're literally stripped. It's like they're in rags. They've lost a lot. They've lost a lot of money. They've lost their home. They've lost their parents. So there's typically a big loss. And so just like when we lose our old life because it was not even real anyway. When I say that, I mean it was a web of deception. We thought it was real. You know what I mean? But there's this stage of, it's a little bit of anxiety, but it's mostly uncertainty, right? Okay. So let's talk about it. Why is this stage more heavy at times? Why is this uncertainty? Because uncertainty is sort of a neutral type term, right? So it could kind of go either way. It could be, we could put the energy of excitement into it, like, ooh, like I wonder what's going to happen next. Or we could put the energy of, oh gosh, now what? Which is like this anxiety type energy, right? Okay, but here's the thing. When you're living it, we're talking about stories, but when you're living it and it's your life, it's your present moment, that's the thing. The thing about the present moment is that it feels like, I do this because it's like within you, it feels like this is all there is right now. Okay? And because of that, it's so strong and undeniable, really, that we completely dismiss the ending of the story, especially when it involves our life. What is the ending? Let's look to the stories. Let's look to the ancient myths and fairy tales and folklore that have been passed down for a reason from generation to generation. What is the ending? Well, it may vary a little bit story to story, but in general, we know it's good. We know it's a good ending, right? It's typically peaceful. Oftentimes, it's where dreams come true. And especially, it's where the main character is given another chance at life. Right? But let's go back to where we are in this transitional phase. Okay? It's during this present moment stage of our journey, okay, where we're not worried about the ending. We can't see it. We're in the dark forest, okay? If we could just put one foot in front of the other without falling, we're doing good, kind of thing. See what I mean? But it's during this time where it's so helpful to find clues, you know, about the future. It's kind of like, this is a stage in our life where we need evidence. We need evidence, you know, to keep going. We're really tested during this time, okay? So let me share this with you. So there's a Bible verse that that's all about this. It's about there being more than the present moment, okay? So, which is interesting because that's what makes the Bible unique, the Christian Bible. And so in talking about this, it kind of is breaking out of and reaching beyond a lot of the Eastern belief structures and systems, right? Philosophies. So the verse is this one. It's the one that says, I know the plans I have for you, right? God knows. When it says I, it's God. I know the plans I have for you. So there's plans. Okay, plans. So we may not have any plans right now. We don't know what to do, you know. But there are still plans for our life, and that's important. That's important. So what are they? Okay, well, the verse continues, and it says, plans to prosper you. Okay, plans to not harm you. So that's good. You know, safety, plans for safety and peace, all good. Prosperity, all good, right? And then lastly, plans to give you hope and a future. Excuse me, hope and a future. Okay, this is important. The fact that it says, it doesn't say have hope. It says, I have plans to give you hope. In other words, to me, that's acknowledging that you may not have any hope right now, you know? But there are plans to give you hope. So if you're on that trail, if you're in the woods, if you're on foot and you're trudging through and you're in transition and everything's uncertain, right? And you feel like, you know, you may not really just be depressed. You may be, but you may not be. You may not even be anxious. You may just be kind of like, now what? You know, I'm just done with all this stuff, but now what? Just know. You know, I feel like hopelessness is often associated with depression, and I don't think that it always has to be that way. I think that you cannot necessarily be depressed per se, but I think that not having hope can kind of feel sometimes like it's in alignment with just not having plans for the future. You know what I mean? So if you don't really have that spark inside of you of hope, that excitement, right? Like, ooh, now what? If that energy, that's kind of what I mean when I say hope. If you don't really feel that inside of you, just know that there are plans for that spark from that greater fire to land in your heart. Okay? So, I think that's cool. That subtlety in that verse, that there are plans to give you hope. Because what is that? It's an acknowledgement to say, hey, look, not have hope, like your friends. Like, hey, you just need to get over this. Or, hey, you just need to do this or that. You know, God's not doing that to you. He's not like, hey, just have hope. No, he's saying, look, I have plans to give you hope. That's cool, because that's an acknowledgement, right, of this stage in our life where you may not even have it. You may not even have it. It's like, okay. You know? So yeah, essentially, it's in the works. It's in the works. All this stuff. Hope is in the works, right? A future, it's in the works. Prosperity in the works. This is from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. So it's in the plans. God says, I have plans. I have plans for you. So let's do a little word study. So in looking at the etymology of the word plan, the noun from the 1670s, it meant as a technological term in perspective drawing, right? More generally in 1706 as the representation of anything drawn on a plane, okay, which is from the Latin planum or planum, meaning level or flat surface. So we were talking earlier about, being thrown out of balance, I absolutely feel a correlation here between being in balance and having plans. I think that's a really important component to no longer staggering along the path, but finding your sure footing. The plans. Okay? So, because essentially, if we look at plans, it's also related to a level surface. Level. All right, so we also have plain, P-L-A-I-N, which means smooth or even. Okay? Also unembellished, unadorned, and without decoration. These three descriptive terms are soothing to me because when things are embellished, adorned, and decorated, that kind of describes the old way, the worldly way, the showy way, the sheep's clothing way, the flashy way, the deceptive way, the surface level, the without substance way that used to suffice for us in various ways in our old life. And now they don't. We don't want it, in fact. Not only do they not suffice now, but we literally don't want it. We don't feel good about it. There's no room in our new life for that kind of stuff now. So I thought that was really cool, looking at plans and plain, P-L-A-N-E, as well as plain, P-L-A-I-N, meaning smooth, even, and unembellished, unadorned, and without decoration, right? Because that's how we like it. Simple, straightforward, uncomplicated. So, why is that? Like I said, I think we, as part of going through this experience and learning and growing, we realize that a lot of times it's in the fluff. It's in the extra stuff where the spell can be cast. See? Okay? So there's no room for that now. And when we talk about plans, I do think there's a difference between God's plans for us and our plans. There's even a verse about that. How God has many, it says man has many plans in his heart, but essentially it's like God's plan that will prevail. But I want to go back to the word study of plan. This was really cool. This was cool. So there's a Proto-Indo-European root, Pele, which means, well, there's several meanings, and they're all really neat, okay? One is flat. Two is to spread, right? And then we have plane, so it goes into plane, P-L-A-N-E, meaning to glide on motionless wings, okay? We're talking about movement. We're talking about transitioning and getting somewhere, but there's no effort. The wings are motionless. It's flat. Okay? This goes right along into what God put on my heart earlier about loosening the grip. All right? We're learning to walk by faith. We're learning to walk by faith and not by sight and not by effort. Right? We're learning to allow just kind of loosen up a little bit. Just chill out and allow the path to unfold before us. That's what we're being taught during this time. Okay? So another meaning of Pele, which was really cool as well, is to fill. To fill. Okay? With derivatives referring to abundance and multitude. So we have in Matthew chapter 16 verse 25, and I just hope that you get something out of this, even if you're not a Christian. I hope that you can find something valuable in the message regardless. So even with my references. So in Matthew chapter 16 verse 25, Jesus is talking and he says, whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. Okay? So in chapter 16 in Matthew, Jesus is basically he's telling the disciples the plans for his crucifixion, okay? And Peter's like, no, that can't happen. And what's interesting is Jesus actually rebukes him. He says, he calls him Satan. He says, get behind me, Satan, right? And he elaborates. He says, you are a stumbling block to me. In other words, this has to be fulfilled, right? Or the King James Version says, thou art an offense unto me, right? So he goes on to explain, he tells him that he's more concerned about human concerns than what matters to God, right? So let's just consider this. What if we try on this explanation for things right now? What if this exemplifies the mindset that you are in now? Okay? Because you're going to feel energetically, you're going to feel out of alignment with the world now. Okay? But you're actually perfectly balanced in the spiritual. It's kind of like we had to be flattened. Okay? Kind of like rolled out like dough. Right? To be reformed into something new. So maybe you're feeling confused or uncertain because you're in the Maker's hands right now. So I hope this has brought you some encouragement, inspiration, maybe some insights, maybe something to journal on and think about. And I just thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you found it valuable, and I just thank you again, and I hope to see you again soon. And I would love to hear your thoughts down below if you feel called to share them. So have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.